The silence of deep space shattered as reality itself seemed to tear open near the outer rim of the Zephyrian system. What emerged from the swirling vortex of twisted spacetime defied every law of physics the Galactic Empire had established over their 3,000-year reign. The vessel that materialized was unlike anything in their extensive databases of known ship designs. Admiral Kekstar of the Imperial's 7th Fleet watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, as sensor readings flooded his tactical displays. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the impossible readings. The ship before them measured nearly 8 kilometers in length, its hull a matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange geometric patterns etched across its surface pulsed with an eerie blue luminescence. "Impossible," whispered his sensor officer, a young Veltani whose tail twitched nervously. "The energy signatures are off the charts. This vessel is outputting more power than our entire fleet combined." Kekstar's mandibles clicked in irritation. In his 2 centuries of service to the Empire, he had never encountered anything that challenged Imperial supremacy. The Empire controlled over 40,000 star systems, commanded fleets that numbered in the millions, and possessed technology that had remained unchallenged for generations. Yet here was a single vessel that made his massive dreadnought feel like a children's toy. The mysterious ship hung motionless in space, its massive bulk casting shadows across the nearby asteroid field. No communications came from the vessel, no identification signals, no responses to the standard Imperial hailing frequencies. It simply existed, silent and menacing, like a predator studying its prey. Captain Valnara, Kekstar's second-in-command, approached with a data pad clutched in her 6-fingered hands. Her species, the Korathi, were known for their analytical minds and cautious nature. "Admiral, our deep scans are being deflected by some kind of interference field. Whatever technology they're using, it's at least 1,000 years ahead of our most advanced systems." The Admiral's confidence wavered for the first time in decades. The Galactic Empire had built its dominion on technological superiority and overwhelming force. Their ships could crack planets, their weapons could sterilize entire star systems, and their armies had never known defeat. But this single vessel radiated a power that made even his strongest weapons seem inadequate. "Deploy the standard intimidation formation," Kekstar ordered, his voice betraying none of his growing unease. "Full battle array. Let them see what they're dealing with." The 7th Fleet, comprising over 300 vessels, arranged itself in the Empire's most fearsome display of force. Massive dreadnoughts moved into position alongside heavy cruisers, destroyers, and support ships. Each vessel bristled with weapons capable of reducing cities to ash. Collectively, they represented enough firepower to subjugate entire civilizations. Yet the human warship remained motionless, seemingly unimpressed by the overwhelming display of Imperial might. Hours passed in tense silence. The Empire's standard protocols demanded submission or destruction when faced with unknown vessels in Imperial space. But something about this ship made Kekstar hesitate. Perhaps it was the way their most advanced sensors couldn't penetrate its hull, or how their targeting systems kept losing lock whenever they tried to paint it with weapons guidance. Whatever technology this civilization possessed, it was beyond Imperial understanding. The breakthrough came when Lieutenant Zexlin, a communications specialist, detected unusual quantum fluctuations emanating from the mystery vessel. "Sir, I'm picking up what might be an attempt at communication. The patterns are completely unlike anything in our databases, but there's definitely intelligence behind them." Kekstar straightened in his command chair. First contact with unknown civilizations was a rare event, especially ones that possessed technology that challenged Imperial supremacy. "Can you establish a communication link?" "Working on it, sir. The transmission methods are extraordinarily sophisticated. They're using quantum entanglement paired with some form of temporal displacement that I've never seen before." The young officer's tentacles worked frantically over his control interface. "I think I can jury-rig our systems to interface with theirs, but it will take time." Time was something Kekstar wasn't sure they had. Imperial doctrine was clear about unknown vessels in controlled space. They were to be identified, catalogued, and either inducted into the Empire or eliminated. This ship clearly fell into a category that Imperial planners had never anticipated. After what seemed like an eternity, Zexlin announced success. "Communication established, Admiral. Audio and visual coming through now." The main viewscreen flickered to life, revealing the interior of what was unmistakably the bridge of the alien vessel. What Kekstar saw there shook him to his core. The beings operating the ship appeared almost laughably primitive compared to the advanced species that populated the Empire. They had only 2 eyes, 2 arms, and stood upright on 2 legs. Their skin was a pale pinkish color, and they lacked any of the natural armor, toxic secretions, or enhanced sensory organs that marked truly evolved species. Yet these seemingly inferior creatures commanded technology that dwarfed imperial achievements. The human who appeared to be in command stepped forward. He was tall by the standards of his species, with graying hair and eyes the color of deep space. When he spoke, the universal translator struggled with the alien language before finally producing comprehensible words. "I am Captain James Mitchell of the Human Federation Starship Retribution," the being said, his voice calm and steady despite facing an entire Imperial fleet. "You are currently in violation of human space. You have 30 minutes to withdraw your forces beyond the territorial boundary." The bridge of the Eternal Dominion fell silent. In 3,000 years of expansion, no civilization had ever made demands of the Galactic Empire. The very concept was absurd. Yet here stood this primitive-looking being, commanding a vessel of impossible power, issuing ultimatums to the most feared military force in the galaxy. Kekstar's rage began to overcome his caution. "Unknown vessel, you are in Imperial space by right of conquest and colonization dating back over 2 millennia. You will stand down immediately and prepare to be boarded for inspection and processing." Captain Mitchell's expression didn't change, but something cold passed through his eyes. "Admiral, I'm going to assume this is a misunderstanding. The Zephyrian system was claimed by human colonists 47 years ago under the Terran Expansion Accords. Your empire was notified through proper diplomatic channels. We have mining operations on 3 asteroids and a research station on the 4th moon of Zephyria Prime." The Admiral checked his records frantically. Deep in the Imperial archives, he found references to some primitive species calling themselves humans who had filed territorial claims in this remote sector. The claims had been dismissed as irrelevant. The Empire had been dealing with more pressing matters at the time, including a rebellion in the core worlds that had taken decades to suppress. Some minor species claiming a few rocks in the galactic rim had seemed beneath notice. "Your claims are irrelevant," Kekstar declared, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. "This system falls within Imperial space. Your presence here is illegal." "Admiral," Captain Mitchell replied, his patience clearly wearing thin, "I strongly advise you to reconsider your position. The Human Federation has no desire for conflict, but we will not surrender sovereign territory without cause. You have 27 minutes." The communication channel closed, leaving Kekstar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his crew waited for orders, their confidence shaken by the impossible situation they found themselves in. The Empire's protocols were clear, but those protocols had been written for dealing with inferior civilizations, not whatever these humans represented. "Admiral," Captain Velnara said quietly, "perhaps we should contact Imperial Command for guidance. This situation falls outside normal parameters." Kekstar considered the suggestion. Admitting that a single alien vessel was giving him pause would be career suicide. Imperial admirals were expected to handle any situation with swift, decisive action. Yet the readings from that ship continued to defy explanation. Their weapons couldn't lock onto it properly, their sensors couldn't penetrate its defenses, and their entire fleet was being casually dismissed by what appeared to be a single warship from a species they'd never heard of. "Negative," he decided. "We proceed according to Imperial doctrine. Prepare the fleet for attack formation. If these humans want a demonstration of Imperial power, they'll get one." But, as the minutes ticked by and the human vessel remained motionless in space, Kekstar couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to make the greatest mistake of his career. There was something about the way that ship sat in space, patient and predatory, that reminded him of the great void hunters of his homeworld. Creatures that appeared deceptively calm right up until they struck with devastating force. The timer continued counting down, each second bringing them closer to a confrontation that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. 26 minutes. 25. The human ship waited, its alien crew presumably making their own preparations for what was to come. Kextar had built his reputation on decisive action and overwhelming force. In 24 minutes, he would discover whether those qualities would be enough to handle humanity's first real introduction to the galaxy at large. The Galactic Empire was about to learn what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object, and the universe would never be the same. The countdown reached zero with the precision of atomic clockwork. Captain Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Retribution, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the Imperial fleet maintain its aggressive posture. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements betraying none of the tension that filled the air. These were veterans of the Centauri Wars, survivors of the Siege of New Geneva, and warriors who had learned their trade in the harsh crucible of interstellar conflict. "Captain," reported Commander Sarah Chen from the tactical station, "the Imperial fleet is moving to attack formation. I count 317 vessels, including 12 dreadnoughts. They're charging weapons and raising shields." Mitchell nodded calmly. "Very well. Implement Protocol 7. Minimal force demonstration." Lieutenant Commander Torres at the navigation station couldn't suppress a slight smile. Protocol 7 was the Human Federation's standard response to aggressive posturing by technologically inferior civilizations. It had been developed after first contact with the Rigelian Confederacy, refined during the vegan trade wars, and perfected through decades of frontier expansion. The basic principle was simple: demonstrate overwhelming technological superiority without causing unnecessary casualties. Protocol 7 acknowledged, Torres replied. "All departments report ready." On the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kextar watched his tactical displays as his fleet moved into the Empire's most devastating attack formation. 3 centuries of conquest had proven the effectiveness of this arrangement. Dreadnoughts would deliver the killing blow while cruisers and destroyers provided supporting fire. No enemy had ever survived the full fury of an Imperial battle fleet. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Captain Velnara announced. "Weapons charged, shields at maximum, targeting solutions locked." Kextar stared at the human vessel, still hanging motionless in space like a sleeping giant. Whatever technology they possessed, they would soon learn that numbers and firepower could overcome any advantage. "Give them one final warning, then open fire." The communication channel reopened, showing Captain Mitchell's calm face once more. "Human vessel," Kextar declared, "you have ignored Imperial authority for the last time. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." Mitchell's expression didn't change. "Admiral, you've made your choice. I regret what happens next." The channel closed just as Kextar gave the order to attack. What followed challenged everything the Imperial Navy believed about space combat. As the first wave of antimatter torpedoes raced toward the human ship, something extraordinary happened. The weapons simply vanished. Not destroyed, not deflected, but gone as if they had never existed at all. Advanced plasma cannons that could melt through the hulls of dreadnoughts fired their deadly beams, only to watch them dissipate harmlessly against some invisible barrier. "Impossible," shouted the weapons officer, his tentacles working frantically over his controls. "Direct hits confirmed, but no damage registered. It's like they're not even there." The human ship began to move. Not the slow, ponderous acceleration of Imperial vessels, but a fluid, almost organic motion that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. The Retribution glided through the asteroid field like a fish swimming through water, weaving between chunks of rock with impossible grace while the Imperial fleet's targeting computers struggled to maintain lock. Captain Mitchell's voice echoed across every ship in the Imperial fleet simultaneously, somehow bypassing their communication security entirely. "Admiral Kextar, you've demonstrated the firepower of your fleet. Now allow me to demonstrate ours." The Retribution came to a halt directly in front of the largest Imperial dreadnought, so close that crew members could see each other through the viewports. At this range, even the most primitive weapons should have been devastatingly effective. The Imperial captain didn't hesitate, ordering every weapon on his ship to fire at point-blank range. The barrage that erupted would have reduced a small moon to vapor. Antimatter warheads, plasma cannons, particle beams, and fusion torpedoes all struck the human vessel simultaneously. The explosion was so brilliant that automatic filters engaged across the fleet to protect sensitive optical equipment. When the light faded, the Retribution hung unchanged in space. Not a scorch mark marred its surface, not a single system showed damage. It was as if the most powerful weapons in the Imperial arsenal had been nothing more than fireworks. "Now," Captain Mitchell said quietly, "observe." A single port opened on the side of the human ship. What emerged was barely larger than a fighter craft, a sleek vessel that moved with the same impossible grace as its parent ship. The small craft accelerated toward the Imperial dreadnought that had just fired every weapon in its arsenal. The collision should have been meaningless. The fighter was perhaps 50 meters long while the dreadnought measured over 2 kilometers. It should have been like an insect striking a mountain. Instead, the human fighter passed through the Imperial vessel's shields as if they didn't exist, penetrated the massive hull without slowing, and emerged from the other side in a perfectly straight line. For a moment, nothing happened. The dreadnought hung in space, its running lights still operational, its crew presumably unaware that anything had occurred. Then, with surgical precision, the mighty warship split exactly in half. The two sections drifted apart slowly, revealing that the human fighter had somehow severed every system, every bulkhead, every structural member with impossible accuracy. Emergency lights flickered on as automated systems tried to compensate for the catastrophic damage. The crew was unharmed. Emergency force fields had activated instantly, containing atmosphere and protecting the beings inside. But their ship, one of the most powerful weapons in the Imperial arsenal, had been rendered completely helpless by a craft no larger than a shuttle. Across the Imperial fleet, panic began to set in. If the humans could do that to a dreadnought, what chance did smaller vessels have? The demonstration had been precise, calculated, and absolutely devastating in its implications. Admiral Kekstar found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. What are you?" The human fighter had returned to its mothership, disappearing into the same port from which it had emerged. Captain Mitchell's image appeared on screens throughout the Imperial fleet, his expression remaining calm and professional despite the chaos he had just unleashed. "We are humans, Admiral. Citizens of the Human Federation. We are explorers, scientists, artists, and philosophers. We are also warriors when the situation demands it." His eyes hardened slightly. "We have been fighting wars longer than your empire has existed. We have faced extinction and survived. We have looked into the abyss and made it blink first." The implications of what they had just witnessed began to sink in across the Imperial fleet. This wasn't just advanced technology, it was power beyond their current understanding. The humans had demonstrated the ability to completely negate Imperial weapons while delivering surgical strikes with impossible precision. If they chose to, they could presumably destroy the entire fleet without breaking stride. "We don't want war," Mitchell continued. "We want to live in peace, to explore the galaxy, to make friends among the stars. But we will not be bullied, conquered, or dismissed. This system belongs to humanity by right of settlement and development. Your empire was properly notified of our claims through diplomatic channels." He paused, letting his words sink in. "However, we understand that this is the first real contact between our civilizations. Misunderstandings are inevitable. We propose a simple solution: withdraw your fleet beyond the territorial boundary, acknowledge human sovereignty over our claimed systems, and we can begin proper diplomatic negotiations." Kekstar looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Fear, confusion, and awe in their expressions. These were veteran spacers who had seen the Empire's enemies crushed beneath overwhelming force. Now they had witnessed their most powerful weapons rendered useless and their strongest ship neutralized by what appeared to be casual effort. "And if we refuse?" Kekstar asked, though he dreaded the answer. Captain Mitchell's smile was neither cruel nor triumphant, merely matter-of-fact. "Then, we will demonstrate why humanity survived when so many other species didn't. Admiral, I've shown you what one small fighter can do to your largest ship. The Retribution carries 3,000 such craft, plus weapons systems that make that little demonstration look like a child's toy." The communication ended, leaving the Imperial fleet floating in space with the wreckage of their former flagship drifting between them and the human vessel. The message was clear: they were completely outmatched, and the humans could destroy them all without apparent effort. But Admiral Kekstar was a product of the Imperial system. He had been raised on stories of imperial might, trained to believe that the Empire was the ultimate expression of civilized power. The idea that some unknown species could challenge that supremacy was almost impossible to accept. "Admiral," Captain Velnara said quietly, "perhaps we should consider their offer. This ship represents technology centuries ahead of ours. If their entire civilization possesses such capabilities." Kekstar knew she was right, but admitting defeat to an unknown species would mean the end of his career and, possibly, his life. The Empire didn't tolerate failure, especially not failure on this scale. Yet the alternative was potentially watching his entire fleet destroyed by weapons he couldn't even understand. As he wrestled with the impossible choice before him, long-range sensors detected something that made his blood run cold. More ships were emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. Not Imperial vessels, but more human ships. Dozens of them, each one radiating the same impossible energy signatures as the Retribution. The demonstration was over. Now came the real test of whether the Galactic Empire was ready to acknowledge that humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, bringing with them power that could reshape the balance of civilization itself. The emergence of the Human Federation's Second Fleet fundamentally changed the dynamics of the confrontation. Admiral Kekstar watched in growing horror as his sensors counted vessel after vessel materializing from hyperspace. Each ship bore the same impossible energy signatures as the Retribution, and several were even larger than the flagship that had just casually dismantled his dreadnought. The largest of the newcomers was a behemoth that dwarfed even Imperial super-dreadnoughts. The vessel stretched nearly 15 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull adorned with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living things. When it moved, space itself appeared to bend around it, creating visual distortions that hurt to look at directly. "Reinforcements have arrived," Captain Mitchell announced, his voice carrying a subtle note of satisfaction. "Admiral, meet Fleet Admiral Elizabeth Kane, commanding officer of the Human Federation's 2nd Expeditionary Force." A new face appeared on the Imperial Fleet's communication screens. Fleet Admiral Kane was an older woman with silver hair and eyes that held the weight of decades spent in deep space. Her uniform bore decorations that spoke of battles fought in distant star systems, conflicts that the Galactic Empire had never even known existed. "Admiral Kekstar," Kane said, her voice carrying an authority that transcended species barriers, "I understand you've been having a disagreement with Captain Mitchell regarding territorial boundaries. Perhaps I can help clarify the situation." Around the fleet, Imperial officers exchanged nervous glances. The arrival of additional human vessels had transformed what appeared to be a manageable situation into something approaching a nightmare. If one human ship could neutralize their strongest dreadnought, what could an entire fleet accomplish? "Admiral Kane," Kekstar replied, struggling to maintain his composure, "the Galactic Empire has governed this region of space for over 2 millennia. Your claims have no legal standing under Imperial law." Kane's smile was polite but cold. "Admiral, I think you misunderstand the situation. We're not asking for recognition under Imperial law. We're informing you that human law now applies in human space, and you are currently in violation of our territorial sovereignty." She gestured, and holographic displays materialized around the Imperial fleet, showing star charts marked with clearly defined boundaries. Hundreds of systems bore the distinctive symbols of human colonies, research stations, and industrial complexes. The scope of human expansion was staggering, covering vast swaths of space that the Empire had considered empty frontier. "As you can see," Kane continued, "the Human Federation has been quite busy over the past half-century. We've established settlements in over 400 systems, built industrial complexes capable of producing fleets like the one you see before you, and developed defensive networks that span multiple sectors." The implications hit Kekstar like a physical blow. The Empire's expansion had slowed in recent decades as they focused on consolidating control over their existing territories. Meanwhile, these humans had been quietly building a civilization that rivaled the Empire in scope and vastly exceeded it in technological capability. Captain Velnara leaned closer to her admiral. "Sir, if their claims are accurate, they've established a presence in regions we've never even explored. Our frontier scouts reported those sectors as uninhabitable." "Uninhabitable by your standards," Fleet Admiral Kane corrected, somehow overhearing the whispered conversation. "Humans are remarkably adaptable. We've learned to thrive in environments that other species find hostile." Frozen worlds, desert planets, gas giant moons, asteroid belts, even rogue planets drifting in interstellar space. Where others see obstacles, we see opportunities. To demonstrate her point, Kane transmitted detailed scans of several human colonies. The imagery showed thriving cities built inside hollowed-out asteroids, floating habitats drifting in the atmospheres of gas giants, and industrial complexes operating in the vacuum of space itself. The scale of engineering involved was breathtaking, representing a level of technological mastery that made Imperial achievements look primitive by comparison. We've been monitoring Imperial expansion for some time, Kane continued. Your civilization is impressive in many ways. You've brought order to chaos, established trade networks that span the galaxy, and created a stable government that has endured for millennia. But you've also grown complacent. Admiral Kextar bristled at the suggestion. The Empire has conquered 1,000 species and unified the galaxy under a single rule. We are hardly complacent. Conquered, yes, Kane acknowledged. But when was the last time you faced a real challenge? When did your fleets last encounter an enemy that could fight back effectively? Your empire has grown strong by fighting weak opponents, Admiral. You've forgotten what it means to face an equal. The truth of her words stung because they were accurate. For generations, Imperial expansion had involved overwhelming technologically inferior civilizations. The Empire's military had grown powerful through sheer size and industrial capacity rather than innovation or tactical excellence. They had become the galactic equivalent of a heavyweight boxer who had only ever fought children. What do you want? Kextar asked, finally, acknowledging the reality of his situation. His fleet was outmatched, outnumbered, and completely dependent on the mercy of these human commanders. Fleet Admiral Kane's expression softened slightly. What we've always wanted, Admiral. The right to exist peacefully, to explore the galaxy, and to build homes for our children among the stars. We don't seek to conquer the Empire or impose our will on other species. We simply want recognition of our sovereign right to the territories we've legitimately settled. She paused, studying Kextar's face on her viewscreen. The galaxy is vast, Admiral. Large enough for both our civilizations to prosper. The Human Federation proposes a simple arrangement: formal recognition of our territorial claims, establishment of proper diplomatic relations, and peaceful coexistence based on mutual respect. Captain Mitchell's voice joined the conversation. We're also prepared to offer something the Empire hasn't had in centuries: real allies. Humans have faced extinction multiple times in our history. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, global wars, and diseases that killed billions. We've learned that survival often depends on cooperation with others who share our values. The offer was tempting, but Kextar knew the political realities of the Empire. Admitting that another civilization could challenge Imperial supremacy would cause chaos in the core worlds. Rival political factions would use any sign of weakness to advance their own agendas, potentially triggering civil wars that could tear the Empire apart. The Empire cannot simply recognize territorial claims without proper investigation and negotiation, Kextar replied diplomatically. Such matters must be decided at the highest levels of government. Of course, Kane agreed. We understand the complexity of the situation. However, Admiral, we cannot allow Imperial fleets to operate within human territory while these negotiations take place. Your presence here is a direct challenge to our sovereignty. She gestured toward the edge of the system. We propose that your fleet withdraw to the territorial boundary while diplomatic channels are established. Ambassador Sarah Thompson will accompany you to initiate formal contact with Imperial leadership. In exchange, we guarantee safe passage and pledge that human forces will not advance beyond our current boundaries during negotiations. The offer was reasonable, even generous considering the overwhelming advantage the humans clearly possessed. Yet Kextar knew that retreating in the face of a single enemy fleet would be seen as cowardice by his superiors. His career would be over regardless of the tactical realities involved. Admiral, Captain Mitchell interjected, perhaps I can help address your concerns about how this withdrawal might be perceived by your superiors. Before Kextar could respond, every ship in the Imperial fleet was suddenly surrounded by translucent energy barriers. The barriers appeared harmless, but, when the weapons officer attempted to test them, his instruments registered something that made him nearly faint. The energy fields weren't just defensive, they were dimensional stabilization matrices that could theoretically contain the explosion of a star. "We are currently demonstrating our gravitational manipulation technology," Kane explained calmly. "Every vessel in your fleet is now held in place by fields that could compress matter to neutron star density if necessary. Your crew is perfectly safe, but your ships cannot move until we choose to release them." The demonstration was elegant and terrifying in its implications. The humans weren't just technologically superior, they possessed mastery over fundamental forces that the Empire barely understood. If they could manipulate gravity and dimensional space with such precision, what other capabilities did they possess? "Admiral Kekstar," Kane continued, "we're going to release your ships in a moment. When we do, you'll discover that your navigation computers have been updated with new star charts showing current human territory. You'll also find detailed technical specifications for subspace communication protocols that will allow direct contact with our diplomatic corps." She paused meaningfully. "Most importantly, your ship's logs will show that you encountered a previously unknown civilization possessing technology that required immediate consultation with Imperial Command. Your decision to withdraw for reinforcements and diplomatic guidance will be recorded as prudent tactical judgment rather than retreat." The offer was elegant in its simplicity. The humans were providing Kekstar with a face-saving solution that would protect his career while achieving their own objectives. It was the kind of sophisticated diplomacy that suggested these beings understood politics as well as they understood physics. "We're not your enemies, Admiral," Mitchell added. "We're simply another species trying to make our way in the galaxy. The universe is dangerous enough without adding unnecessary conflicts between civilizations that could be allies." The gravitational fields around the Imperial ships flickered and disappeared, returning control to their crews. True to Kane's word, navigation computers throughout the fleet were displaying updated star charts and communication protocols. The technical sophistication required to simultaneously hack hundreds of separate computer systems without triggering any security alerts was yet another demonstration of human capabilities. Kekstar looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were experienced officers who understood the realities of space combat. They had seen their most powerful weapons rendered useless, watched their strongest ship disabled by what appeared to be a casual effort, and witnessed technological demonstrations that challenged their understanding of physics itself. "Admiral," Captain Velnara said quietly, "perhaps discretion is the better part of valor in this situation." For the first time in his career, Admiral Kekstar found himself agreeing with a strategic withdrawal. "All ships," he announced over the fleet communication network, "prepare for departure. We return to Imperial space for consultation with Command." As the Imperial fleet began its withdrawal, Fleet Admiral Kane transmitted one final message. "Admiral, when you speak with your superiors, please convey this message: the Human Federation seeks peaceful coexistence with all civilizations willing to respect our sovereignty. We have no desire for conquest or conflict, but we are fully prepared to defend our territory and our people." Her expression grew serious. "The galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place. The age of imperial monopoly is over. Welcome to the age of galactic cooperation." The Imperial fleet departed the Zephyrian system, leaving behind the human vessels floating peacefully among the asteroids they had come to protect. As they entered hyperspace, Admiral Kekstar contemplated the message he would have to deliver to Imperial Command: humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same again. Behind them, the Human Federation began the careful work of establishing formal diplomatic relations with a galactic empire that was about to discover that the universe was far larger and more complex than they had ever imagined. The real challenge wasn't military or technological, it was whether two vastly different civilizations could learn to share a galaxy that suddenly seemed much smaller than it used to be.